Okay. Who wants to ask the first question? Who wants to ask the first question? I have all these index cards of questions. Yay, Maddie. They're somewhere. Just ask any question. I know they're here. Wait. There. Here, I'll ask one. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'll ask. Wait, well, do you know about like non-profit organizations and stuff? So you did a non-profit organization, right?
Is your organization nonprofit?
Yes, Earth Island Institute is a nonprofit organization. It was founded by David Brower. Dave Brower was one of the great environmentalists. He was the first executive director of the Sierra Club, and he went on to found Friends of the Earth and the League of Conservation Voters and Earth Island Institute, which I work with.
Do you know if it was hard starting a non-profit organization?
It is, which is why we started Earth Island, actually, because what Earth Island does is we go out and look for people who have special projects in mind that they want to do, and if they become a project of Earth Island, then they don't have to start their own nonprofit organization. They don't have to pay the taxes and filings with the Internal Revenue Service because Earth Island Institute does that for them. They don't have to do their bookkeeping, they don't have to have a board of directors. All of that's required for a nonprofit organization. So the Earth Island is very different from other organizations. We're a bottom-up organization rather than a top-down organization. In that, as I say, people come to us and say, hi, I've got this great idea for a project and I want to do this and this. And we say, okay, and if we adopt them as a project, then they can set up their own system and do their own thing and don't have to worry about establishing a nonprofit organization themselves. Because it's quite complicated, it costs money, you have to get a lawyer, etc. to set up a nonprofit.
How have dolphins assisted improvements in technology?
Didn't quite catch that.
What? I'm sorry.
How have dolphins assisted improvements in technology?
How have dolphins assisted in improvements in technology?
Sonar.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, sonar and also aerodynamics. The body of a dolphin does a lot of things that in the water that can be used and applied to technology. For example, they change shape as they swim in order to be more aerodynamic. I say it's actually water dynamic under the water. So we a lot from that. They can swim very fast with a minimal amount of energy, and that's been of interest. Certainly there's been, as you say, a certain amount of information we get from them about sonars and how to use echolocation. So yeah, there are various things, not much, I would have to say, in those terms. The dolphin hasn't really been looked at as a model for technology, but there's been a few things we've...
Oh. No.
Oh,
Okay. Next question.
when you went to Taiji, Japan, did the people know like the fishermen were selling dolphin meat as whale meat?
They deny it. It's been something that has been discovered. There's a number of different interesting things that have happened when you test whale meat on the market for its DNA. For example, there's been a number of endangered species of whales that have shown up. Now, Japan claims they don't kill any endangered species, but indeed we've seen humpback whale, for example, meat show up in Japanese markets from testing on DNA. And then, as was said in the code, that it was dolphin meat was being sold as whale meat. And it fact, one of the things we're thinking about doing is doing some more of that DNA testing coming up in the next year, 2015. Getting samples of whale meat on the market in Japan and testing it to see what it really is. You know, you tell the Japanese this and they just shrug and say, oh, well, I mean, the government officials or the fishermen, and they all shrug and say, oh, that's not true, or they say, well, it doesn't matter, and it's very hard to pin them down about that kind of stuff. And it's very hard to get that information out to the public in Japan because the media tends to follow the government line and isn't particularly interested in what we have to say. That's been a major, major problem in Japan to get the word out of what's going on in Taiji.
Just to interject, did the film help at all? Like, you know, because it's been a few years since it's been out, so did it do anything?
It did for a time. Again, not many people in Japan saw it, but there was a lot of media coverage about it when it came out because the media couldn't ignore it. It was shown in a number of theaters in Japan, but again, there's only a few hundred people who saw it in theaters there. It's never been shown on TV, as it has been shown in this country on television. And so it's out in DVD now. Plus, we've done things, one of the things we did was to get copies of the code in Japanese, and we took it and distributed copies to everybody in Taiji. One night we went around to all the mailboxes and dropped copies for free of the code in people's mailboxes. So we've gotten the word around, and the number of dolphins being killed in Japan has gone down, or at least in Taiji has gone down. And we think, again, it's because of concerns for mercury that people know about through word of mouth and through our efforts locally to spread the word, such as getting copies of the code into people's mailboxes.
Next question, Panera?
What are your views on SeaWorld and places like that?
SeaWorld?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because we're in a project now where we're working on SeaWorld on a number of fronts. We've just done some interesting work with a media center that has been doing surveys of the public and focus groups looking at public attitudes in the United States towards SeaWorld. And at the same time, we've been looking at some litigation against SeaWorld, which you might hear about in the near future. We haven't gotten to the point where we filed our case yet, but we probably will in January. And basically, SeaWorld needs to go away from having orcas and dolphins in captivity. You might have seen, one of the things you might try to look at, if you haven't seen it, is the documentary Blackfish, which is a great documentary about SeaWorld and what happens to orcas in captivity. So take a look at Blackfish. It's on Netflix and it's out on DVD now. So there's a variety of pressures on SeaWorld. Right now, SeaWorld is kind of fighting back and denying that there's a problem. So that's part of our effort, is to get them out of the denial situation and get them into a mode where they're going to start looking at these things differently. That's always hard for a big agency. They're making a lot of money. I mean, millions and millions of dollars a year on orcas and performing dolphins. But it's bad for the dolphins, and it's bad for the orcas. It's also bad education for the public because they're not getting a true view of what these animals are like. They're getting a circus performance. They're not getting a biological survey of what these animals are capable of doing in the wild and how they live in the wild. So it's very, very misleading.
Next question? And then
SeaWorld sucks is basically the
Okay, is that Catherine?
Sean.
Oh, okay, so Michelle and then Tori.
Stand up. What is your personal involvement with the dolphin massacre crisis?
Okay, my personal involvement with dolphin, didn't hear the rest of it.
Massacre crisis. Like what?
Massacre crisis. Well, I'm associate director.